Hi there, I'm going to read Chapter 30 of Lila, An Inquiry into Morals by Robert M. Pirsig. As he got closer, Phaedrus saw that it was Rigel's boat. What a relief. But Rigel was supposed to be going to Connecticut. What was he doing here? Then Phaedrus remembered Lila had said Rigel was coming. How had she known that? When Phaedrus got to the dinghy, he set down his tote bags of groceries and began to untie its painter from the steel spike in the log. "Wait!" he heard. He turned and saw Rigel standing on the deck of his boat, his hands cupped over his mouth. "I'm coming ashore!" Rigel shouted. Phaedrus stopped untying the dinghy. He watched Rigel get down into his boat's dinghy. He wondered why Rigel didn't just wait for him to get there. He watched Rigel row the short distance, looking over his shoulder slowly, his aristocratic features becoming closer and more distinct. He was smiling. When he got the boat beached, Phaedrus helped him lift it onto the sand. "I just thought I'd come ashore and talk for a while with you," Rigel said. His smile was formal, calculated, a lawyer's smile. "What's up?" Phaedrus asked. "Well, first of all, I'm here to collect some money," Rigel said. "I paid your bill back at the marina." "My God," Phaedrus said, "I completely forgot about that." "Well, they didn't," Rigel said, and brought out a receipt from his pocket. While Phaedrus looked at the receipt and fished out his billfold, Rigel said, "I gave them a little extra to calm them down. They thought it was some sort of a drug transaction and didn't want to be involved in it. As soon as you were gone, they calmed down and forgot about the whole thing." "That's good," Phaedrus said. As Phaedrus paid him, Rigel asked, "What have you been doing?" "I've just been getting some groceries," Phaedrus said, "enough to get us to Atlantic City at least." "Oh," Richard Rigel said, "that's good." There was a pause, and his face became a little tense. "Where's Bill Capella?" Phaedrus asked. "He had to go back," Rigel said. "That's too bad." Rigel seemed to wait for him to go on talking, but somehow he wasn't in the mood. As neither one of them said anything, Rigel seemed to get visibly nervous. "Why don't we go for a walk for a while?" Rigel said. "Down this path here." "Well, you can if you want," Phaedrus said. "I just want to get back to the boat. I've been going all day." "There are some things I'd like to talk about," Rigel said. "Like what?" "Important things." Rigel had always seemed bothered by something he wasn't talking about, but now it seemed even worse. His verbal language and his body language seemed to go in different directions. "You remember our conversation about Lila back in Kingston?" "Yes," Phaedrus replied. "I remember it well." He tried to say it flatly, but sounded sarcastic anyway. "Since then," Rigel said, "what you said has been going round and round in my mind." "Is that right?" "I can't seem to stop thinking about it, and I'd like to talk about it some more. Since we can't very well do that with Lila present, I thought perhaps we would go for a walk." Phaedrus shrugged. He retied the painter of the dinghy to the rusty spike, and then, with Rigel, headed up the path away from the road. The path in this direction was carpeted with wood shavings, and as they continued walking, he saw it changed to a covering of fine black stone. A sign on one side that he hadn't noticed before said, U.S. Interior Department. The marsh with the old day beacon in it looked the same as before, but the white egret was gone. "You remember that you said Lila has quality?" Rigel said. "That's right. Would you mind telling me just how you came to that conclusion?" "Oh, for God's sake," Phaedrus thought. "It wasn't a conclusion," he said. "It was a perception." "How did you come to it?" "I didn't come to it." They continued to walk quietly. Rigel's hands were clenched. He could almost hear wheels going around in his head. Then he said exasperatedly, "What was there to perceive?" "The quality," Phaedrus said. "Oh, you're being ridiculous," Rigel said. They continued to walk. Rigel said, "Did she tell you something that night?" "Is that why you think she has quality? You know she's mentally ill, don't you?" "Yes. I just wanted to be sure. I'm never much sure of anything where she's involved." "Did she tell you she's been chasing me all the way across New York ever since I left Rochester?" "No, she didn't tell me that." "Every damn bar, every damn restaurant, wherever I turned, there was Lila. I told her I didn't want anything to do with her. That case with Jim was over, and I was done with it. But by now I'm sure you know how well she listens." Phaedrus nodded without adding anything. "The reason she came to that bar in Kingston was because she knew I was there. That was no accident. You know, her taking up with you in the bar that night. She saw you were a friend of mine. I tried to warn you, but you weren't listening." Phaedrus remembered now Lila had asked a lot of questions about Rigel in that bar. That was true. Then he remembered something else. "I was so drunk it was hard to remember anything that happened," he said. "But I vaguely remember one thing." Just as we were crossing the back of your boat to get to ours, I told her to be very quiet, not to make any noise, because you were probably sleeping under that deck. She said, 'Where?' And I pointed to the spot, and then she picked up her suitcase way over her head and slammed it down with all her might, right on that spot. I remember that," Rigel said. "It was like an explosion." "Why did she do it?" "Because I wasn't having anything more to do with her," Rigel said. "Why was she chasing you?" "Oh, that goes back forever." "To the 2nd grade, she said." Rigel suddenly looked at him with an almost frightened look. Whatever he was so nervous about had something to do with this. "She said she was the only one who was nice to you," Phaedrus continued. "That's not true," Rigel said. Ahead, overgrown by bushes, was some unidentifiable concrete wreckage like a modern sculpture growing in weeds. Rusted metal bolts emerged from concrete slabs broken up by goldenrod. It looked like the base of 2 steel cranes. "She's different from what she used to be," Rigel said. "You wouldn't believe it now, but back in grade school, Lila Blewett was the most serene, pleasant-natured girl you could ever meet. That's why I was so shocked when you said she had quality. I wondered if you saw something there. What happened to change her?" "I don't know," Rigel said. "I suppose the same thing that happens to all of us. She grew up and discovered the world was not the place we think it is when we are children." "Did you ever have sexual relations with her?" Phaedrus asked. It was a shot in the dark. Rigel looked at him with surprise. Then he laughed deprecatingly. "Everybody has," he says. "You're no exception in that regard." "Did she become pregnant after that?" Phaedrus asked. Rigel shook his head and made a pushing away motion. "No, don't jump to conclusions like that. That could have been anyone." They walked on, and Phaedrus began to feel depressed. The path seemed to go on, without getting anywhere. "We better turn around," he said. He was beginning to feel like the detective at the end of a murder mystery, except that the detective gets a feeling of satisfaction from having finally run some quarry into the ground, and Phaedrus wasn't getting any satisfaction from this at all. He just really didn't want to have anything to do with this person anymore. They turned around, and as he walked back, Rigel said, "There's still one other question to be taken up." "What's that?" "Lila wants to go back with me." "Now?" "Yes." "Where?" "To Rochester. I know her family and friends and can get her taken care of." "Taken care of?" "Certified." Oh my God, Phaedrus thought, institutionalized. A real wave of depression hit. He just walked for a while, not saying anything, because he didn't want to say anything wrong. Finally he said, "I think that's an exceptionally poor idea. She's all right on my boat." "She wants to go back." "Because you talked her into it?" "Absolutely not. The last time I talked to her, she said she wants to go south, which is where we're heading." "That isn't what she wants," Rigel said. "I know what she wants," Phaedrus said. Now Rigel didn't say anything. They continued to walk, and before long the boats were back in sight again. Rigel said, "I don't know quite how to tell you this, but you better hear it." "Hear what?" "Lila said she wants me to take her back to Rochester." He paused. "Because you're trying to kill her." Phaedrus looked at him. This time Rigel looked straight back at him, and his nervousness seemed gone. "You see what the problem is," Rigel said. "That's why I wanted to take this walk with you," Rigel continued. "I didn't expect this when I came down here. I just came to see if everything was all right, but under the circumstances, I rather got you into this, although I certainly tried not to." "I'll talk to her," Phaedrus said. "She's already transferred her suitcase and other things onto my boat," Rigel said. "Then I'll talk to her there," Phaedrus said. This was a real disaster coming, but blowing up now would just make it more likely. He got into his dinghy and Rigel let him row ahead. He tied off on his own boat, went aboard, and on the other side crossed over the lifelines to Rigel's boat before he arrived. When he looked down below, he saw Lila's poor bruised face looking up at him with a smile. Then the smile disappeared. Maybe she'd thought he was Rigel. He went down below and sat across from her. Now she looked as nervous as Rigel had been. "Hello," he said. "Hello," she said back. "I hear you want to go back." She looked down. Guilt. This was the first time he had ever seen her look guilty. He said, "I think that's a very bad mistake." She still looked down. "Why are you going back?" Lila looked up and then finally said, "I wanted to go with you. You don't know how bad. But now I've changed my mind. There are a lot of things I want to do first." Phaedrus says, "There's nothing but trouble waiting for you back there." "I know that, but they need me." "Who?" My mother and everybody. He looked at her. Well, he wanted to ask, if they need you so badly, then why the hell were you heading south in the first place? But he didn't ask it. What changed? He wanted to ask. Did Rigel put you up to this? Who put you up to this? Do you know what's going to happen to you back there? Is this some kind of suicide? My God, Lila, you haven't done one single solitary smart thing since the moment I met you. Do you know that? When are you going to start? But he didn't say all this. He just sat there like a child at a funeral watching her. There was really nothing more he could say. She wanted to go back. There was nothing he could do about it. You're absolutely sure, he said. Lila looked at him for a long time. He waited for a flicker of doubt to appear, and waited some more, but she just sat there, and then she said it so quietly he could hardly hear it. I'm all right. Then he thought for a while. Longer, wondering, in what he knew would be the last chance, if there was something missing he could say, but he couldn't think of anything. Finally he got up and said, okay. He climbed up to the deck where Rigel was standing. He said, she wants to go. When are you leaving? Right now, Rigel said. She wants to leave right away, and I think under the circumstances it's better. As Phaedrus watched him start up his boat engine, he felt somewhat dumbstruck. He crossed over to his own boat, helped Rigel cast off the lines, and then watched with a strange sort of paralysis as Rigel's boat turned and then headed back north across the bay.